Good morning, everybody.
Guten Tagen.
Guten Doggen. That's when you have a good dog.
Yes, and Bill is in the studio as well. He's just taking his dandy time.
He's a disembodied voice.
Yes, I hear myself in the background. That's why he
Disembodied
closed
Bill.
my door.
Yep. He's a disembodied Bill.
Disembodied. Well, I told him that he had to join today, and he's,
Hello.
Hello, Bill. You're the disembodied Bill voice.
Yeah.
I told him that he wanted to argue with him today.
Yeah.
Who are you? You don't look like you're in your normal office space.
So I've moved my camera 90 degrees.
Oh.
Because I liked it better with the bookcase behind me.
Okay.
Because it looks more, scholarly.
Mm-hmm.
Bill,
That I have the big window right here, and I like looking out at the park whenever I'm writing and stuff like that. Because
that makes sense.
So,
Bill, do your controversial argument starting.
Okay. I heard you wanted to argue, so I said I'm just going to come on and say that Star Wars is clearly the superior story than Star Trek. So
Star Wars is superior story to Star Trek. You're just going to side with Brent then. You and Brent are going to side against me, huh?
I can't even argue for it. That's the sad part.
Right. What's your premise on that?
I have no premise. I just wanted to start an argument.
A fight. I like that. He's like, nothing, just starting a fight. What do you think? Oh, man, that's funny. Oh, man.
No, it's not safe to talk about Season 3, Episode 1 yet.
No.
You guys still haven't seen it, huh? That's funny. No. I actually have been reading a lot about things like UBI and things like that. So which is not, in fact, like an infection or something like that of your urinary tract.
It's just an infection of the mind, really.
Right, an infection of the mindly tract. So
that tracks.
That's not an infection of the Star Trek either. Yep, it's pretty funny. And it's actually fascinating to read the history of that. Much more interesting than I thought it would be. I guess these are just going to be small. There's nothing I can do about this because, so last night I discovered that some of these Springs comics were, I guess, lost. The originals are lost because these are just the small versions, the versions I posted online. But they're small. I mean, they're still fine. They're not it's not like it's horrible, but they are kind of blurry if you get too close, you can kind of see that they get blurry and low res.
Mm.
So it's I don't know. I'll have to work on this, I guess. I don't know. I went looking for them on my hard drives and I can't find them. I think they're gone forever, and that's kind of a bummer.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. Especially since last night, while looking for them, I found the original Springs, like the first 30 that I did in 2000. The original scans of all of those, and I was like, oh man, that's awesome. But these two are going to be ones where we're just going to have to accept it. They're just weird.
Can you just convert them into like a vector? I mean, they don't look
Super complicated.
too complicated. Yeah, I mean, the background is just a gradient, really.
For this one, the background's a gradient, but this one's got the actual backgrounds in it.
True.
Which I don't know. I mean, I can redo them. Then probably what'll happen is someday I'll redo them, but that'll take a couple of hours for each one of those. And really, I'm trying to get this ready to go to print. So I think 2 out of however many pages. I've got a lot of pages over here of comics. I think I can accept that 2 of them are probably not going to be in high resolution.
You could try running them through AI upscaler.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is I might either upscale it through AI or something, or hopefully at some point down the road, there would be something that happened where, you know what, I'm going to just rearrange these pages. I'm going to make my PC really freak out. There we go. And then I'm going to do this and just mention that something was weird with 2019. Because these are really strangely. Like, I was trying to get them figured out, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah, we'll figure something out with them. I'm not. Something about 2019 comics.
Where are these from? Are these yours?
Oh, yeah. These, I'm going to make a book version of Springs. So I've compiled all of the Springs comics that I've done over the years and put them all in here. And so I've been trying to get them all into this book. You can see on the left side here on this book. And when I did, I was like, they don't quite all fit. I was like, some of them are weird and some of them are strangely shaped. And I didn't really consolidate the way that I was going to do it until I had gotten quite a ways in. I mean, like, I think I didn't actually come up with a format that I agreed with until 2017 or so.
No direct relation, but from my childhood, this reminds me of the Far Side books that would come out with all the Far Side comics in them.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. That's sort of what I'm doing, is just like those normal, Garfield books or the Far Side books or whatever. I am pleased that we are not done with 2019, and I am now out of pages in this book, which means I need to add pages to it, which is excellent. I had wondered whether 94 pages was enough, and it isn't. And I'm glad to see that, because I had been kind of going, I don't know. And it was like, meh, I don't think that'll fit like I want it to. But it's been cute doing this comic, and I really enjoy it, and I do it every Monday if I can. Today I can't think of a joke because I'm a little tired, so I'll have to think of one and see if I come up with one for tonight. But usually I think of a joke for
Bill
Monday.
got jokes. Bill got jokes.
What?
He's one of Bill's jokes. They're very punny.
I don't have them on hand. I have to be in the moment.
In the moment, it has to be right there. You have to fire off a perfectly good dad joke.
Yeah, we have to start sooner or later.
Yeah. It's part of the contract. Okay, so let's go over here and add a few pages. We've got to go into the main controls for this and add pages. So how you doing, Bill? Since you're here.
Pretty good.
That's good.
Eating some breakfast. I
Sounds
think you
fair.
didn't want to hear me chew, so I'm just I talk in between reading.
100. I have to be in groups of 4. So maybe I'll add 2 more groups of 4, maybe? Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see. This should be enough to get us through 2019, which is kind of strange. My one toilet humor. I don't know. I think I felt like a particular group I was not quite set up properly, like in the moment. Feels like it was a little weird. I did like the selfie drone. It was funny. We don't have music. We'll do lounge music for it. So, Pepper, all your lights are off. You're in a dark cave,
It's reflecting my soul.
right?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
On the topic of AI, it would be interesting to, running locally, mind you, feed all of your comics that you have here for this in
Mm-hmm.
the model, and then when you come up with a new joke, feed the joke into it and see what it would spit out, and would it be any good?
I like the provision of running locally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's not feed that into some AI somewhere.
No.
Use that.
Like, a lot of people don't get, like, you can run the AI locally. You don't need to feed it into the world. You can have your own models that you create. That's your work. So when it generates more of your work for you, then it's more of a tool, not so much of a end of the world kind of thing.
Right.
I'm already using it for my job. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Uh-oh. All of these are out of order.
Are you doing anything with AI models, Brent, specifically? That's cool. Nice.
Why are these all small? Oh, no. This is going to suck if these are all small. Like all the original 2020s are all this size. What's going on here? I am determined to make my life miserable. I swear.
Is this a Creative Cloud app or something else?
Are you talking to me or Brent?
You.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all up on the cloud, but it's not Creative Cloud.
I mean, it's not an Adobe product.
Oh, it's an Adobe product. I use Photoshop Photoshop originally for these.
Okay.
But for space purposes, I kept saving stuff as JPEGs and then deleting the originals.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm paying the price for it because now they're all, 600K, which is great. And they're also not 600 DPI, which is not great.
So the reason I ask is because I know Photoshop does. I'm sure InDesign or not InDesign. Is InDesign the layout app?
Yeah.
Yes, InDesign is a layout app.
So InDesign may have it, but you should be able to create like a template and literally say, here are all my images, and it'll just auto load them if you want. I mean, it won't give you necessarily the precise ability to like go, these go here, this one goes there, that one goes there, without doing what you're doing now, which is being very precise with your layout.
I could have put this into InDesign and thought about it, and then the reason I didn't was just simply because it's everything's a different size. Not until in about 5 comic strips it'll all become uniform. But for the 260 comic strips before that, it wasn't very uniform. Because the first comics I drew in 2000 on actual pieces of paper, 11 by 17, and then as time has gone on, of course, I moved to digital at some point in time, and then I moved to color, and and then I had to decide: am I doing 600 DPI at 11 by 17? Am I doing 300 DPI at 11 by 17? 600 DPI at at 8.5 by 11? What am I doing? And then sometimes I'd do it and it'd be too small for the screen. So part of the problem with Springs was I did a bunch of Springs comics and then sent them to the syndicates. Because the thing that started me on Springs was that Charles Schultz retired. And he retired in February of 2000. And I was like, you know what? I could easily do that. Because I was an idiot. So I was like, hey, I'll do that. That sounds like fun. And so I did. And it was like, well, It was not easy, but I could do it. And I did a test run where I did 313 of them because that'd be 1 year's worth of comics. See if I could. It'd be 1 year's without Sundays. So it was sort of a thing that I did, and I did those, and I did them fine. So I proved that I could do it. So proving, because I wasn't going to trust my ADD. You know what I mean? Like, if my ADD was going to be a space cadet and weird,
Right.
I wasn't going to trust it.
I'm going to guess you probably could do 2 a day, like pencil, ink, colored, text, etc. Is that a good guess, or more or less?
One more time on that one. What?
You could do about 2 strips a day.
Yeah, I can. It takes me about 2 hours to do 1 strip.
Oh, completely. Okay.
Yeah. At this point, at this juncture, I can do one of these strips in 2 hours. Usually, during the duration of the show, I can finish a strip out. And now I've gotten the process now down to a fine science. So, like, one of these strips, fully colored, with a joke and everything, in 2 hours. And that was the point. That was the mission statement. So I theoretically could be a professional strip artist with Springs, in theory, easily. You know, because I could just do it every morning and broadcast it and stuff. But there have been some interesting things that I have learned over the years. One, Springs can only be superficially political. If Springs gets too deep into politics, my muse leaves me, which is interesting. So I will always need to have Bellatrix Rising as my other output for politics and politicizing and saying things. You know, Springs has to be always just lighthearted.
Right.
Interesting thing. I didn't realize that my muse was so fickle, but it is very, very fickle about that. But yeah, I mean, and it's not a problem. I have actually this cool little Excel spreadsheet that I use, which has like every trope that's ever been used in comic strips, and it just you hit the button and it randomly spits one out. And I use that as sort of my spark to start up a joke. I'll just think of something that's happened recently, and it'll put, you know, a joke up there or whatever, and it'll spit one out, and then it just, you know, things like, you know, Lucy and the football, right? That's a classic trope. So I'll think of something, you know, like AI or something like that. We'll talk about AI art or whatever, and I'll try to make it fit to Lucy and the football and then apply it to my characters. And that's just enough structure for my ADD brain to spark an idea, and I'll come up with a joke about it. You know, it's funny because like politics are not allowed in Springs, but here I am talking about COVID because this was right at the very beginning. This is 3/17/2020. So I stopped talking about it at some point because COVID, even though it was a big thing that was going on in our world, it became politically charged, and I wasn't allowed to. My muse wouldn't allow me to continue making jokes about it.
Right.
It was kind of funny how that went down.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean your muse?
I'm sorry, what?
What do you mean your muse?
Like whatever. Well, that the inspiration comes from. Whatever.
Okay. It's an internal thing. Okay.
Yeah, internally.
Because I didn't know that was like.
Hey, it's not funny anymore. There's nothing funny. You know, I can't make jokes. And then if I try to force it, the comics come out flat and stupid. You know?
I didn't know if you meant like there was someone external that regulated what you were submitting that you were referring to as your muse, or like some kind of internal thing that was
right. No, it was totally an internal thing. It's weird. It's like all of a sudden I just nothing was funny anymore, and it was like, well,
Right.
that's, you know,
You need to be able to laugh at what you did, or it's not funny.
right. So 319, 319. They both came out apparently on the same day. 323, 323. That's really weird. I don't know what those were about.
So where were these published?
I put them out on Facebook.
Okay, so this doesn't go to like some other publisher. This is just your stuff.
No, it doesn't go to a publisher. That's what I was saying. I did put it out to the syndicates, and they all turned me down. Back in 2020. So they turned me down in 2000. In 2000. They all turned me down, and so I thought that was the end of Springs. And then at some point, my best friend and I were talking, and he was like, "Whatever happened to that comic strip about the robots?" And I was like, all of the syndicates turned me down, so I didn't pursue it. He goes, "I liked that." I'm like, okay. But I don't, I mean, the syndicates don't want it, so he was like, well, they invented this thing called the internet. This is like 2015, so it's not like, he was just being sarcastic about it. And I don't know why I had never thought about the idea of putting it on the internet, but it was actually closer to 2013, I think was when this was, but he was talking about putting it on the internet and then starting a Patreon.
Yeah, I was about to say, why don't you put like a Patreon around it?
Yeah, and that's what he said too, and that's what he said. And so I did, and I got like 4 people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could also do what's that comic one hun that I said for like Kiki Poppy that we should put that out on? Where like when you get traffic, they start paying you.
Say that again.
When you get enough traffic, they start paying you, I think.
Tapas and webtoons, they kind of, if you gain enough popularity, they will pick up from their canvas or their. Basically, what it is they'll see your numbers tracking. They'll ask if you want to go professional. They start paying you for it, and you just have to maintain that audience. That's pretty much all you have to really do. The problem with some of those services is that when you use them, they kind of pigeonhole you in the sense of you have to run things by them if you get a deal of some sort.
Right.
And some people don't like that. Others do, others don't. It just depends. But essentially, it makes a lot of people feel like they no longer have control over their own comic. So there's a downside to it.
Well, I looked into Webtoons and Tapas. Actually, Springs is out on Webtoons. It just doesn't garner any. I don't know. I feel like, and this may be just my imposter syndrome, but I feel like nobody really is that interested in Springs, and so
if you ever have this, if you ever think it might be imposter syndrome, it's definitely imposter syndrome. Rule number 1.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, you could. You already said you're doing that, but I mean, I was thinking you could do both Patreon and that. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. So.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is like, I get that people like Brent, and I know that Patsy like Springs, and you know what I mean. And it's not to say that I don't think that people like Springs. I do. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's commercial, So I will keep making Springs for Brent, and I don't have a problem with that. I just don't know if necessarily it's going to be something that I will ever make a lot of money off of. And now, actually, as things are going as they are, for the moment, I'm making money just fine through other sources that allow me to do this most of the time. And I am perfectly content to work my own thing, doing my own stuff, drawing my own stories. And if people like them, that's awesome. And I don't worry about whether they're financially viable. You know what I mean? Like, that's the biggest thing is I feel much, much freer because it's not financially struggling. I'm not, oh no, Coca-Cola doesn't want me to make jokes about soda pops, so I can't make a soda pop joke. You know what I mean? Like, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I can make whatever jokes I want to make. I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. I'm free to do whatever I need to do, which I feel like one of the jobs that an artist has is to make people think. And they don't have to agree, just make them think. And, or in the case of this, make them laugh, make them feel in some way. In the case of Springs, it's make them feel. In the case of Bellatrix Rising, I'm trying to make them think. But that's I've got two different purposes. But you can't if someone's saying, well, if you don't say what I want you to say, I'm not going to pay you money.
Right.
If you don't make them feel the way I want you to make them feel, then I'm not going to pay you money, because then you're restricted. You have to do it. You have to do it. And it goes against your muse, and it goes against what you're after.
Right.
And so, in a way, I'm happier where I am. I'm happier. I specifically say on my Patreon that if you join me as a patron, I'm not putting extra stuff on my Patreon because they can't remember to do it. But it's a tip jar. You're throwing a tip to me. You want to buy me a coffee every so often so that I'll continue to make Springs jokes. That's cool. And I feel like that's a better place to be. I'm not beholden to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Bill, why don't you tell Guy about that camera?
So I was watching video. I always watch video about making more money because who doesn't need more money? But he's talking about side gigs that you could do. And I was telling Pepper about one that wasn't necessarily compatible for him, especially if we're going to be parents soon. But you can buy a 360-degree camera and start up a marketing company for realtors to walk through photos of their home. And you just set the camera up, press a button, it does a 360 scan, you move it 5 feet, press a button, and it all goes in the cloud and renders out, and then you can hand that over. And people make like $300 every time they do it. And I said, you could just do those like once a week or something. And then he mentioned that you did that. I didn't know you did that. Well, I mean, not the walkthrough, but you did photos for...
No. I actually have a 360-degree camera.
Oh, okay, cool.
Actually, biggest problem I have with it is getting out of its stupid way.
Right.
Because there's actually rules to real estate photography.
Oh, really?
And one of them is you can't be in the pictures. Dogs can't be in the pictures. People can't be in the pictures. Stuff like that.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
The problem with 360-degree cameras.
Well, are these actually like rules and regulations, or are these just like standards that realtors want in their photos?
Rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Is actually really, really, really regulated.
Huh.
It's a lot of regulations and stuff like that. Like, you can't shoot your own sign. Like, if you put a sign in front of the house saying for sale, you have to kill the sign. So that's an issue that, like things like that, like weird. I mean, and I know why. I mean, it totally is because the realtors abused it for a long time.
Probably. I mean, if there's a system, someone's abusing it. That's the rule, right?
Yeah. No, wait a minute. Did I just put this in? I just put this in. Yeah, I did. Weird. Anyway, yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that's very interesting. Like all of it doesn't bother me. I mean, like the rules aren't that hard. It's not complicated, but weird rules that you do have to kind of like, like I'm sorry, I have to ask you to please put your dog outside.
Right.
Take pictures. But why? Because your dog can't be in the pictures. And some of it makes total sense. I actually asked somebody once, one of my realtors, why. And they're like, well, because if you've got a cute puppy in the picture, people are going to buy the house for the cute puppy instinctually. They don't mean to, but they do. If you have a mean dog, they won't buy the house because the dog's mean,
Right.
And the dog has nothing to do with the house,
I find
take pictures of the cats and the dogs and stuff like that anyway, because it makes some sense.
Right. I find that humorous, purely humorously in that kind of regulation, because it's like, okay, you can't have a cute dog in it because someone might instinctually buy it because there's a dog in it. But that's pretty much every single marketing tool like that people use in real marketing. Put happy things in, put cute things in it. How do you get people to buy stuff? Like that's the whole point of advertising.
Right. Well, and
you do it here, even though you're advertising.
Yeah, the point, of course, is that you don't want to influence people on anything except the house. You want them to buy the house on the house's merits.
Well, I understand it. I get it. I just find it humorous.
I find it funny also that, of course, part of the humor of this whole thing is that though that is the case, and you have to follow those rules. Then again, also, one of the things they didn't regulate was that I use like a really wide lens, and that's what everybody does now. Really wide lens, which makes the houses look huge.
Right. That's one thing I don't like.
That, and now everybody does it, and if you don't, you're the one that's putting out these little teeny houses, and nobody buys them because everybody wants a big house.
So it's like when you see the pictures of homes that don't have furniture in it to make them look bigger.
Yep. Although the way we tend to do it is that we tend to dress the home up so that it looks nice.
You stage it.
And actually, the reason that I was told that we don't use furniture if we can avoid it, and it's not we can't, we don't. The way I was told was because you want people to envision the home with their stuff in it, not yours.
Well, when you don't have a 6-person seating table, it's kind of nice to see it in the house.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time we don't. The realtors I work with are nice guys. Because I don't need. There's not a big need for money on my side, so I don't have to work for people I don't like. So, I work for only realtors that I dig and I think are being, ethical. But, and that's just me. I'm sure. I mean, people who are trying to get through, trying to pay paycheck to paycheck, they're probably a little bit more susceptible. But anyway, what I was trying to say. Anyway, so the guys that I work for all are they're just trying to. They really want you to look at the house and go, yeah, this is what I want. This is my house. They really want you to envision yourself in the house. So their purpose behind that is different.
Right. I've heard it both ways. I feel like it just depends on whether their opinion generally of people are in that, like, some realtors are the idea that people don't have the vision to see themselves and their stuff in the home, so you have to stage it so they can see it. Then there are other people that believe that people can do that, and so then they don't want anything in there, so that when someone comes in, they can see their stuff.
Right.
So it just depends on what they think, what they believe.
Yeah, I mean it's weird. I don't know. I mean I feel like I don't. I feel like sometimes capitalism doesn't do us the best job. You know, I think most of the time capitalism does a great job, but sometimes, boy, it does hurt. I think that's one of them.
Mhm.
You know, people won't be ethical because they need to pay the bills.
Of all the horrible systems there are for exchange, it's the best one.
I am starting to change my opinion slightly on that because I actually agree with you.
Mhm.
No disagreement on that. However, I think that it's what got us to here, but I think there needs to be something else going on with it too. So we'll have to modify it.
Well, keep in mind that what we have currently is not capitalism.
Right, but that's so true. There is a certain amount of that is true.
When people complain about the system today, they are not complaining about capitalism, even though they might blame capitalism. They might assert their negative feelings towards capitalism, but that is not the system we have today. So they're blaming the wrong thing.
Well, that's not what I'm ascribing as a problem. I'm ascribing things like it does not encourage morality.
No.
And that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it sometimes it discourages morality.
That's the problem, though, is like you can't control morality.
You can. That's
No.
what I was saying about the senators. The senators that are in our government, they aren't amoral because they're weak. They're amoral because the lobbyists figured out a system that works.
So you can legislate the appearance of morality. Or, well, not even legislate. Let's just keep with the word control. You can control the appearance of morality, but you can't control morality itself. Someone can appear moral and have people do bad things. There are plenty of examples of that in history.
There is that I'm not disagreeing.
The only thing you can do with morality is encourage it in the right direction. But at least for me, I've never seen any evidence that morality can be controlled. You can only really control the presentation of it. Like you can take someone who's racially charged about things, and they hate people because of the color of their skin. And you could say, okay, you're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z based off of someone's color of their skin. That's not going to stop the hate inside them. That's not going to control the things they do behind closed doors against people because of the color of their skin. But so that they don't appear that they have that racial issue.
Yeah, I absolutely will not disagree with that. That is absolutely true. However, where I differ on this one is that I believe firmly now that we don't start out that way. We don't start out amoral. We start out moral, and then we are taught amoral.
I think I'm going to polar opposite on you. I think we start out amoral and we are taught morality.
Which is funny because there is literally no proof of that. But there's a lot of proof that we start out moral and go to amorality. There's like absolutely zero proof that humans by default are amoral, and that's one of the things that I've been reading about with um, this guy who wrote a book called Humankind. That's his whole premise behind the book, is that there's zero scientific proof that we are amoral. However, there is a ton of proof that we are moral scientifically. Like, we repetitively, over and over and over, prove that humans by default are moral. And it is systems that force them to become amoral. Like, if you look at people who, even if you look at people who, for example, rich CEOs who are just raking people over the coals, you always find out that they were raised in some way where they were needing in some way. So they are constantly filling a hole inside them, you know, or something. It becomes some sort of psychological dysfunction that was caused by a lack in their world. And almost, I mean, like, we can even sense it. If you look at like Elon Musk and all of these people, you can sense that there's something missing in their world. They weren't loved enough, or they weren't given something fundamental that they needed, that they are pouring money into to fix. And I mean, like, you can tell it with, like, Musk is obvious. He was not given, he wasn't given any kind of like room to do what he needed to do. So he craves attention like mad, and he just lives off of the attention, and he will do anything to get the attention. Like he's doing now, jumping completely off the deep end, like going somewhere weird, know where he's going.
Yep. I think I can't argue to every scientific reason because I haven't personally researched it. I'm just going by
what I just said.
As a personal student of humanity and observing it through my lens, I see people as being amoral and learning morality in general. I also believe that we are, as a biological species, we have the capacity for empathy, and generally across the species that exists, and we can act empathetic towards our own species and be caring. I also believe there are personality types, and that even if you are raised perfectly and get all the attention you need, and everything is provided for you, you could still end up, being a sociopath, because that's just, deep in your genetics, there was some, you lacked empathy, or you lacked this thing or that thing. And so you are not just a great person, not because you weren't raised right, but because it's just, the genes you were born with.
Yeah. And that's the other thing he said that was fascinating in this book, is that you're not alone. There is actually a fundamental belief that we hold as humans, and he calls it the negativity bias, and I call it the red light bias. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about the red light bias. There was a light near my house.
You talk about this.
Yeah, that was red all the time, and then I went and actually did the research and found out that it was only red 50% of the time. And it fundamentally changed the way I saw the world, because I was absolutely sure that the light was red all the time. I was absolutely sure of it. I couldn't perceive another way around it. I mean, it had to be red all the time. And so it really shook up the way I thought, because I was sure I was balanced, unbiased. I was absolutely sure. But we knew that. I mean, I kind of get that. But the thing that was fascinating about this was that this book has been talking about that and how negativity bias is a real thing. It's and what he says in the book is it makes logical sense for us as humans to assume that the snake is poisonous than to assume that it's cute and fluffy. Right. I mean, survival wise, that makes more sense. So it makes sense. But he was saying that there's new archaeological evidence that's showing that the reason, or that all of the hominids would have been wiped out in the Ice Age. All of us. The Ice Age just was not conducive to hominid life. So Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis, Homo australopithecus, and Homo sapiens would have all been wiped out by the Ice Age. And the only reason we survived was because we had domesticated ourselves. And we turned ourselves into cute babies, effectively. We're effectively Neanderthals that are babies. We're baby Neanderthals. The men look like women, the women look like children, and the children look like infants. And what it does is it causes us to stay in mothering mode for our entire lives. So we mother each other our entire lives, as opposed to doing what all the other hominids did, which was, okay, you're old enough now, boot, and kick them out. Where during the Ice Age, you'd kick your child out, and the child would live for about 3 weeks on the plane, and then die, and then everybody would die. And whereas all Homo sapiens are building homes and holding everybody in it, and in fact, we even took in other Neanderthals. You know what I mean? Like, we started adopting other people and bringing them in. And he said that's what made us get through the Ice Age and made us survive when it really should have wiped us out. And it didn't. And so he calls us Homo puppies because we're actively domesticated, like the dogs domesticated. And he said the dogs and cats domesticated themselves to live with us because we took care of them if they stayed like kittens. Cats are effectively tiger kittens, and that's what we did. They domesticated themselves so that they could live with us. Dogs did the same thing. They domesticated themselves to live with us. And actually, there is proof in Siberia. They've been doing an experiment since the 50s on like the meanest fox that's ever been existed. The silver fox is like super mean, super vicious, super violent. And they took these silver foxes, and in the 50s, they started only breeding the ones that were friendly and not breeding the ones, any fox that would only bite them once instead of biting them 50 times. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And what's happened is today, they have these fox kittens. They're silver foxes. They're fully grown, but they're small, and they bark, and they're cute, and they wag their tails, and they have eyebrows now, so that they can make eyebrow looks. They can look at you eyebrow like.
So is that they domesticated themselves, or we domesticated them?
Well, we domesticated those.
Yeah.
But the experiment was that you could, in a very short amount of time, domesticate a creature, and when you did, they got smaller. They looked like the kittens or the cubs. Even at full grown, they started to bark, which is something that foxes don't do. They started to have eyebrows so that they can communicate with us. They look into our eyes. They look at us. They try to empathize with us, things like that. So it's a live experiment showing that domestication can happen quick. I mean, it's only 70 years.
Right.
And things, that's freaking fast, And what he's saying is that the anthropologists now are starting to believe that we are effectively crying at one another right now. That's what I'm doing to you, is I'm crying. I've just learned to modulate my cry. And so it's crying at you. So we've infantized ourselves. We've made ourselves babies. And then we cried at one another. and then the cry modulates. I'm noticing that with cats. There's videos all over the place where the cats are going, "Rah, yum, 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 burp." I mean, they're literally trying to talk.
Mm-hmm.
The cats are starting to talk. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a thing. Dogs will sit there and go, "Nah, nah, nah," and they're trying to talk.
Right.
It's not just they're not just barking anymore. They're not just
Mm-hmm.
meowing anymore. They're literally trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And as generations are going on, and moreover, cats and dogs now are no longer doing work. They're just part of the family.
Right.
People adopt a cat and a dog,
Mm-hmm.
and cats and I mean, like George. Come on, let's be realistic. George is part of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Like he gets into the show. So the whole point that this guy's been saying through this entire book is our nature is to take care of ourselves. So then he goes through and asks, okay, so how is it Homo puppy puts people in gas chambers? And then he goes through an entire chapter. It's very uncomfortable about how Homo puppy would put people in gas chambers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. And he backs everything up with research. Somebody has done the research. And he says what's fascinating is the media will hold on to this one person killed 50 people. But when you find that 50 people work together to do a thing, media doesn't care. They leave it alone. They won't look into it. There was a famous situation in the 60s where this woman was stabbed in the Bronx and she screamed for help and nobody helped her. And she ended up dying on the stoop of her apartment complex. And that was big news because, like, everybody around said it wasn't my problem. And that became big news. It became such big news that New York sort of took it as their trait of what they are. And it turns out when he did the research on it, all of it was wrong. Like, they took one guy's testimony and it turned out he was homosexual and didn't want to get arrested because it was 64 in the Bronx.
Right.
And so he didn't want to get arrested for being homosexual. So he's the one that quoted, I just didn't want to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't.
Right.
Turns out she was also homosexual. And she was trying to get back to her girlfriend who was in the building.
Mm-hmm.
But she couldn't because she ended up dying in the hallway. But even that was different. Like, when he went into it, he found out that she ended up dying in her neighbor's arms because her neighbor went and got her and tried to call an ambulance and couldn't get through because all the lines were jammed in the building from all the people calling for help.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was the first person called the police and said, "There's a drunk woman outside screaming." And the police wrote that down. And then when the next person called, they said, "We already know about this."
Mm-hmm.
So they wrote it off as a drunk person and didn't realize it was a murder going on. So the police didn't issue a squad car. It's like a comedy of errors. When he found out what really happened, he actually reported back to the woman's brother and told the brother this. And the brother was like in tears. He was like, if I had known that she died in her neighbor's arms, that would have made me feel so much better. Instead of thinking she just died on the cold street.
Right.
You know? Like, the way the news portrayed it, it sounds so horrible and cold. And in real life, people were trying to help all over the place. They were just screwed up with the system. Part of the problem was 911 was invented in 1962, so it was only 2 years old by the time this happened. So they were calling the non-emergency number to the police, and they were getting through to operators that didn't know what to do. Nobody could dispatch anything. People were having problems because this was really early on 911. So this famous story about all the people in the Bronx pulling up chairs and watching a woman die in the street and eating popcorn and all this stuff that apparently happened. None of it really happened. It actually didn't happen that way. And, like all of this stuff, he goes through every incident where it's famous that we are callous and cold, and he finds that it never happened. Like the infamous
Well, there are examples of, at least modern examples of humanity doing things like that. There was a person that was hit by the car, caught on video, and everyone stood around and pretty much did nothing.
Yeah, no, he says specifically there is a thing called bystander effect.
Yes.
But it's a paralyzation. It's not callousness. That's one of the reasons why when you learn CPR, they tell you need to point to someone and say, you call 911.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, everybody thinks somebody else will.
Exactly.
But that's a different thing. He's like, that's not callousness. That's not people not wanting to help. That's people being paralyzed because they're not sure what to do. And that's a different story. Because you're right. That does he was specific about that. He said there really is something about us locking up in face of a problem like that. That really does happen.
So here's an argument against the moral at start argument. And let me pose the argument. Would you say that sharing is a moral attribute?
Sharing?
Sharing.
Like me sharing food with you?
Yeah. Any question?
Yeah, I think that, well, I think that's the thing. I think by default, we share.
And
well,
I'm asking just in affirmative or negative. Would you say that sharing is a positive or negative attribute? Well, is a moral attribute. So someone who is the opposite of sharing, which is they don't share, they're selfish, they do things for themselves.
I think that there's more to it than what you're asking, but yes.
Okay. But follow me down this rabbit hole. Would you say sharing is a moral attribute?
I'm trying to answer that one in a like, as in, do you think that we call sharing morality? Like, I guess it depends on what you call moral. Because I feel like sharing is default. So it'd be kind of like saying, do you think that, running a marathon is a moral attribute? I don't know. I mean,
well,
because in that instance, it doesn't.
If you have a person who always shares their stuff with others and someone who never shares, and you had to rate the morality of the two people, who is more moral, the one who shares or the one who never shares?
Like I said, I would look for something else going on. Let's see if this comes up. Hang on. No, it's not. Sorry. Because I would guess you could say by definition.
That's fine. It doesn't only have to be like a shallow argument.
No, I know. The problem is I kind of see where you're going to head with this a little bit, and I'm like, but I feel like we're going to end up diverging off of it.
No, I don't think so.
But you know what? Let's go ahead and let you go down. You let me go down my rabbit hole. Let me let you go down your rabbit hole. It's only fair. So let's just say, yeah, I think it's morally positive.
Do you need me to leave the room so they can share each other's rabbit holes?
I have to be nice to Bill and let him rabbit hole himself. So,
okay.
Yes, so, go ahead and say yes. I agree that sharing is morally positive.
So, in general, for the purposes of this rabbit hole, we are asserting that sharing is a moral attribute, and never sharing is
a non-moral attribute.
Non-moral. A negative. Do we, in general, have to teach our children to share?
No.
No?
No.
I always see people having to say, no, we share, and stop. We always have to penalize our children when they take the selfish action. We have to go, no, we share in this home, or no, we share in the class.
Exactly.
We always have to assert that lesson. And if we do, then that kind of counteracts the moral at start argument, because you have to teach the morality instead of it being there innately. That's my that's my argument against moral at start.
No, I agree. And actually, if you go look at studies, you will find that studies with children show that they share until they're taught not to. And that's actually, so literally that's what he discovered in because he thought so too. And every one of these things, by the way, in this book that's fascinating to me, he doesn't start with the premise of obviously this is the case. He starts scientifically, which is, I have a theory that this is the default of good morning, Travis. I have a theory that this is the default of people, but I can't prove it. So let me prove it. And then he'll go out there and say, here's my theory. And then someone will say, what about this? And he'll go, you know what? I will go look into it. I'll come back to you. And he'll document it. What apparently happened was in 2006 or 2007, this guy wanted to start. He's Dutch, by the way, so they're in Holland. They wanted to start a website where the media wasn't negative based, but instead was positive based. So it wasn't if it bleeds, it leads. That was the theory behind the website. And so he joined it because he was a journalist, and that's what they did. And so he joined it. And over the years, people would posit ideas to this website that would make him go, huh. You know what I mean? Like, he'd constantly be challenged by these thoughts. And he was like, this is really strange. I'll need to look into that, because since his website wasn't paying him to find the blood, if you will, he was free to go look into it without any repercussions. And what he discovered was that there's a lot of real problems with if it bleeds, it leads as a bias that feeds our culture and feeds the way we see things. And so that's what this whole premise is. But he actually went through that because he was like, well, no, wait a minute, because that's the whole thing he was saying was, why is it we have to teach our kids to share? And what he found was when you go out away from our culture and go into like tribes in the forest and stuff like that, they share by default. You walk in and the kids just give you stuff and things like that. Sharing, he's reasoned, is a result of owning property. And owning property actually is part of the problem that caused us to go this connection path. It's not just a theory, it's a game theory. Obviously Travis watches the same YouTube videos that my child does. I'm noticing, because I've heard that like a zillion times. So respect, Travis. I'm on board with that. Anyway, but it's fascinating to me, because that is something he was saying too, which is that he presumed that would be a deal. We have to teach our kids to be moral. We don't. We have to teach our kids to own property, and that's a different theory. Because you don't teach kids to share. You don't need to teach kids to share. They'll share their food with you. What they won't share is their property. That's a different situation. But I mean, like, nobody needs to teach a kindergartner to share food. They will share all of the food that they've already eaten, some of. Any kindergarten teacher, any preschool teacher knows the kids come up to you with food that's half digested and offer it to you at any time. As gross as that is.
Mm-hmm.
And like cats, what that means is they're saying that you haven't eaten enough and they're worried about you.
It totally does. But it's fascinating because he actually did do exactly that. He asked that same question and came to a very interesting conclusion he didn't expect, because he thought every one of this book is a series of I was sure I had a proof that this was not a real thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
come up with, okay, I believe this is the case, but I'm assuming it's my own bias. That's what he started the book was, I'm assuming this is my own bias. So let's prove that. You know.
Right.
So he went to try to prove his own bias out. And that's where he ended up every time. He's like, I thought I had it, and then I didn't. You know? And it was interesting. Just fascinating to me. Maybe 108? Maybe 116. Maybe I should do 116 pages. No, not 1,000. Thank you, though. I'm trying to add pages to my book because now we're at the end of them. They'll be Mr. Beast and give their money away all the time. Yeah, Travis, I am still baffled by that guy you were talking about. Travis was saying that there's a YouTuber out there that just gives money away.
Yep.
It cracks me up.
He's actually come under fire because of some of the stuff that he's done. So, again, not everyone likes him for doing that.
So you know this character?
I know Mr. Beast. Yeah.
I'd never heard him until
Yeah.
Travis.
He's done things like he's recreated that game where like people die in Korea. Like that. It's like basically it's like they have to like get sugar candy at one point. They have to do Squid Game. Yes.
Oh, Squid Game.
So he recreated Squid Game, and he was going to pay someone the amount of money that was offered at the end of Squid Game, the American equivalent to the Korean payout. At the end of the Squid Game, and he actually did. But like he does like stuff like that, and then he also does like he started out by like doing crazy stunts, like putting a whole bunch of Orbeez in a pool and then diving into it.
Corgis?
Orbeez. Basically, orbs that like.
Oh, okay. I thought you said corgis. I'm like, that sounds inhumane.
Squid Game came first, Travis. Squid Game came first.
Yeah, Squid Game definitely came first. It's just older.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Beast was not the one that came up with it.
I only know of him through other personalities that I watched. I remember there was some other famous personality was angry at the whole thing about him giving like cataract surgery because he was angry that the system puts it behind a paywall, and so he was angry that a YouTuber had to do it. So that was a bit of a controversy there.
Interesting. So they're not mad at him about what he necessarily does.
Right. They're mad about him having to have had done it at all.
Having to have it happen. Well, I'm mad about that too. So.
Travis, I'm not saying that Mr. Beast started making videos before Squid Game. I'm just saying that Mr. Beast did a Squid Game video after Squid Game came out.
Yeah.
That's what I was meaning. Your previous comment kind of made it a little bit ambiguous and kind of made it sound like Squid Game was based off of his video.
Yeah. what would you like about beer? This whole page is all Mike. So anyway, it's interesting. I actually am kind of, so much has changed in culture since this guy wrote these books. Oh, well, and
Yeah.
that's definitely true. And I see what Travis is kind of saying, which is Mr. Beast may have come up with the concept that Squid Games is utilizing, which would make some sense because I think America made something similar to Squid Games at about the same time, and Japan made Alice in Borderland, which is also similar in design. So it makes me think that one of the things that there's a thing called Zeitgeist, which is a German word, which we use in kind of a different way. But the original meaning of Zeitgeist is that everybody is thinking about the same sort of things, the same sort of time. So it is natural for an invention to show up in more than one location. The light bulb was invented in 2 different locations at the same time. It was invented by Thomas Edison, and it was invented by a guy in Paris who had no connection to Thomas Edison at all. It's just that Thomas Edison was the first person to put it to market, because the guy in Paris just acted like most scientists do, and just kind of went on about his business. So there's a certain thing that says this happens. It's just a natural thing. Airplanes were all invented at the same time. We had many people inventing airplanes at the same time. It's just that it was the Wright brothers that got famous for it. But the motorized airplane was invented in like 4 or 5 different locations because we finally got to a technology point where gliders and gas motors could be put together at the same time. So you needed sort of the gas motor to evolve out in order for gliders to be put with a gas motor to make a flight, which is why it's called Zeitgeist. So Marconi and Tesla with the radio, exactly. Tesla and Edison with like 20 different things. I mean, like, they're coming up with stuff left and right. So much so that people thought that they were collaborating.
But they did work together for a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, like, collaborating with the experiments. Like they thought they were secretly collaborating, not competing, which is fascinating too. But
no, Thomas Edison was just profiting off of Nikola Tesla.
Probably also true. I mean, both of those are entirely plausible. It's not unheard of for either one of those.
Well, I mean, Thomas Edison actually took credit for a lot of other people's inventions because those people were working in his lab. So.
Yeah.
But also creatives like people like you and me, Guy.
No.
We also have a wonderful thing in the creative field where all of a sudden you'll put an idea out on the web to do something, but then someone also has that same idea, and then there are people who follow the other person that think that you stole their idea.
Mm-hmm.
And
I actually have a comment I just went through a couple of days ago, or last night even, here on Springs, which was a Zeitgeist, and I remember it happening. And that was the cat going up to the bar and then ordering a drink and then knocking the drink off and then walking away. I totally drew that, and then like a day later saw it on r/comic strips before I had posted it to the web. I came up with it all by myself. But
Well,
somebody
it's
else
kind of
came
like
up with
those pins. It's kind of like those pins that I came up with, remember? And then I
Yep.
had to cancel the entire thing because I found out two people had two different components of my pins.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's Zeitgeist. It's there's a thing out there where the logical next step exists, and it is the logical next step, and so we just create it. It just happens. And I think part of the problem is that there is all kinds of interesting things that that's another one of those where we were just talking about it's against our nature. A lot of things are against our nature, but we do it anyway. And by the way, when he says that some of this stuff is against nature, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to stop doing it. Just that we need to be cognizant of going against our nature. Um, happens all the time in IT. Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, it's fascinating. All of this stuff is fascinating to me. Now I'm reading his second book, which is How Do You Create a Utopia? Which I find fascinating because his first whole chapter is, by the way, the term utopia is not a good term. And
Travis, clever joke.
It is totally weird. You what?
I don't need. Just read what Travis wrote.
Just read what Travis wrote? You're saying. Are you responding to Travis in
He said can of Matchbox. No, but a tin can.
Oh.
So he said clever joke.
I see.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Sarge. I like these comics here. This one right here where no saw. Why do you put yourself through all of this? It relaxes me. It's totally my kid. I totally wrote it for my kid. That's exactly what he does. He completely melts down. I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? I love it. It relaxes me. He literally said that. It's like, it's not relaxing me. As your dad, you're just driving me crazy. No. Uh-oh, Firebird needs electrical work. That's not good. Hey, Sarge, at some point in time I put out there, you and I should probably go to lunch, and I was like, when is a good time for you? So when you are done with firebirding, if you want to just PM me or a good time for you and I can go hang out and have lunch. I'm one of those people that if I don't actually pull the trigger on it, I'm going to forget totally that we were supposed to do it. And then I'll be like, oh, crap, I was going to do this. And I really wanted to, and then forgot. Not because I hate you, but because I forget.
Are you coming out here next month?
Yeah, on the 1st. Yeah. Or I guess it's like the 3rd. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is exactly how I get to hang out with Pepper and Bill. The only way I hang out with Pepper and Bill is because I have something else that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. There's actually a thing that's called chore stacking, and it's something that ADDers can do that helps them remember things because otherwise we don't. And what we do is we stack all of the chores together so that you're triggered by one thing you have to do. And then you stack a whole bunch of other things on top of it. And then it gets over that anxiety that we have about swapping things out and changing things because we don't do well with that. Mm. But it also gets us into a point where we are able to, to do a number of things. And it makes it sound like coming and visiting you guys is a chore. It is not. However, because chore has a negative thing, but it's one of those, if I don't chore stack it, I'll forget it. And then I'll be sad because I actually do like to do it, you know? So it's one of those
I
things.
know I'm a chore to be around. Don't worry.
Okay, but Bill isn't. So I like hanging out with Bill.
Oh, thank you for not denying it.
Right? We had this discussion. So we're making Travis anxious about talking about anxiety.
I don't know if it's anxiety either. Like, I have problems like going to be in public and meet people. Like, I know for a fact, I know factually in my brain, I will enjoy it and I will have a good time, but I just don't want to do it for some reason.
So weird.
In my head, I have to be social, go somewhere. You'll have fun.
It's like you've got to get out and go be a human. What?
Mm-hmm.
Wanna.
He tells me to do it all the time, but then he doesn't do it.
I'll have a group I can go to. You have a group you can go to.
You can go to the same group. You're a writer.
Yeah. You are as welcome at all of the quack stuff as Pepper is. No question.
Yeah, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Oh, have you drawn my creature yet, hun?
Which creature was that? Did you write it down and give it to me? Nope.
Yes, I texted it to you while you were at that event, no less.
Okay. Did you put it on Facebook or text message where I would gradually lose it because you send me about 4 or 5 videos at a time?
I sent it in a regular text message, not a Facebook Messenger chat. And you even responded to it and said I would do that.
Okay. Now, question. Did you send me more texts after that?
Over time, yes, but they were not
They're
for you
gone.
started on.
The thought of it is gone. It's bye.
Scroll up.
Nope. Nope. Hey, Guy. This is what you were talking about earlier, right?
Chore stacking.
Mm-hmm.
The downside of chore stacking is when you get too many of them.
Yeah, you have to put them in the right place. Well, that's one of the things I talk about for why we do this. Why are we doing quack every day? A lot of us are just ADDers and we've got to do something, and so we chore stack to the quack. That's the whole point. Good morning, Donald. You are not an outsider moderating. Brent, you really are part of the quack. You're part of the duck pond by far. Yeah, it's one of those interesting things. Like having to, I always say to my kid, we're responsible for ADD, but we're not to blame for it. You know what I mean? There's nothing we can do about it. It's who we are. But we can try to help each other work it out and work with it. And, not suffer from the drawbacks of it. But it does mean that we're still responsible for operating society.
One problem I have, I don't know if it's ADD, but it doesn't matter what chore it is, and this is why it's so hard to get to a chore. It's because if I do it, then I have to put more level into it than any other normal person would.
Uh-huh.
Like I wall mounted the TV in our bedroom the other day, but I double measured everything. I measured the room width. I made sure it was perfectly centered to the bed, and I got cable ties, and I got wire conduit, and it is like professionally on there. It's beautiful, but it's like I couldn't just slap it on there and be done, and like have it done like the day after I got the part. It had to be 3 weeks later when I could finally get the energy to put into it to do it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't be laundry. The clothes has to be folded perfectly.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think that might also be part of your personality and who you are. I mean, because just because we are ADDers doesn't mean we're all the same.
right.
It could be your personality. My dad was fastidious about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that came from trauma. That was trauma induced.
Mm.
So my dad, like everything, you could borrow his pen from his table, but you had to put it back exactly where you found it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was totally okay with you using his pen. It was absolutely all right. But if you didn't put it back, he wouldn't let you use his pen anymore. And right, Brent
Right.
saying because you're from IT,
Exactly.
cable management is just part of what you do. But I mean, but it's like, it depends on, some of this is just who we are as people. And just part of the existence as humans. So I think that, though I agree that, I think ADD makes it so that you're compulsive to do things.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like what your acceptance level is dependent on how you were raised. How far does this go? What is the extent?
I even velcroed the Apple TV that I have to the back of the TV so I wouldn't have to see it.
Right.
And all the wires are right there and wrapped up. It's nice. Beautiful.
We're always chatting, Travis. I don't know. I mean, I'm doing my comic. I've got to finish this book. And Pepper is doing Pepper work.
I came here to argue, but we're not very argumentative today. I'm just saying.
Well, if you did actually come here to argue, to do what we were talking before, because I actually am a firm believer now in what this guy was talking about, that by default we are all good people, and we are convinced otherwise as time goes on. But I find fascinating to me, the things I find fascinating about that whole discussion is things like he was talking about UBI. For those of you who are not familiar with UBI, which I know is not Bill, I know Bill's very familiar with what UBI is.
Mm-hmm.
That's Universal Basic Income, and that says that by default you get enough money to not be below the poverty line. So you stay above the poverty line, and the government just gives you that money, no strings attached. And that's a perfect example of one of the problems that we all have with society, because what he has said is every time UBI is deployed, it works beautifully. People come out of poverty, they all get jobs, everything works, all things happen. And then every time this belief that people won't reasserts itself, and the project is closed and it's shut down and it never gets seen again until the next time somebody says, why don't we do this? And then we do. And then people who are in poverty come out of poverty. We lose the people in the poverty zones. Everything comes up. Everybody's better off. And then the same thing happens. This belief that people will just be lazy and sit around and not do any work reasserts itself. And then the project is shelved. He said it happened in Canada. It happened here in America. Lyndon B. Johnson came up with it. And Nixon actually managed to pass it through the House of Representatives for UBI. It's called FAP. And it was in 1971. And he managed to get it through the House of Representatives, and it died in the Senate. And it's so weird to see that it literally was. It was give everybody who's below poverty enough money to get up to poverty level so that they were above poverty, and just give it to them, no strings attached. And the House passed it. The media loved it. Everybody passed it, and then the Democrats killed it in the Senate, and they killed it because we still had Dixiecrats in there, and they killed it because it would have brought up the median level of the African Americans, so that they would have been equalized. So it was actually a racism thing that killed it, bizarrely, and that was just weird. It was weird to read through it, and you know what? I read that in the book, and then said, "Okay, he's making this stuff up." And then I went and read it. I mean, like literally looked up the actual bill, looked up everything, and he's not wrong. That's actually what went down. There was a senator named Long who was the one who ultimately killed it out, and he's the one that wiped it out because he was the one that went before the Senate and effectively said, if we do this, everybody will just sit around and not do anything. But more importantly, who will iron my shirts? I'm not kidding. That's literally what he said on the Senate floor. If we do this, who will iron my shirts?
Mhm.
I mean, that was like his quote. and I'm not kidding. The Senate killed it.
Mhm. So I can see some arguments that I would agree with today against it. One, economically, and the other one just really off of human psyche, if you will.
Right, and that's what he was talking about. Was first of all, the Senate Budget Committee agreed that it wouldn't cost. It cost. So part of the problem is it. What started it was costing us about $100,000 a year per person to have people thrown in jail, incarcerated, and all of those parts. So in other words, it was cheaper to give them 50 grand a year than it was to cost $100,000 a year to keep them in jail and put them through the justice system. So the reasoning that they came up with was it's actually cheaper to just give them the money.
Mhm.
Even if they didn't do anything with it, you're effectively paying them to stay out of trouble.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, that was the original initial start that started the whole concept. Was you're paying them to stay out of trouble. We'll give you this 50 grand, but you got to stay out of trouble. Sort of thing.
Well, and I see economic reasons against it.
Sure. But I mean, it doesn't matter. You're going to end up paying for it anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's not my economic the issue that one of the issues that I agree with against it is that with any what's the best way to do this? Anywhere where you give money to people for nothing, for no work, there is an innate inflationary pressure that puts on the economy. We're seeing that today because of all the stimulus that we got through COVID. We're suffering immense inflation because of it, and now the Fed has to increase interest rates to counteract the inflationary forces of free money.
One more time, how did the inflation go up because of this? Because of the stimulus?
So it put more money into the economy than was generated where more products were generated. So money is work and effort, right? That's what money is. You do work in.
Uh-oh, I lost you. Sorry, Bill, I lost you for a minute there.
Bill, you're off air.
Okay, am I back?
You're back on air.
All right.
Yeah, share your video.
Share video. I mean, you can share video, but you don't need to share video.
No, I'm fine.
I'm taking the video off so that he shares video.
Oh, but I have tables behind me and racks, and who wants to see this?
Oh, please. It's clean. For
Fair
sure.
Along with the video, I love actually seeing you in your environment. So
right.
what's wrong with that?
So money is work and effort, right? You do a thing, you create a service, you create a product, you get a tradable version of that, so you can trade your work and effort for someone else's work and effort, right? That's
Sure.
what money is.
That's
Um,
the concept. Yes, I'm with
right.
that.
And you give when you print money and give it out, no work or effort or product was created. So now you have an inflationary pressure upon the economy because people have a unit of work and effort that didn't create anything. So now people have money to buy things that don't necessarily exist, right? Because nothing was created for it. So everyone has money now for let's say glasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no more glasses were printed. So because now there's a scarcity of glasses for the amount of people that want said glasses, prices of glasses need to go up, right? Because nothing was created, no effort was created out of this extra money that was given out. So in a UBI situation, or even today with SNAP and various other things, which I'm not arguing against, right? These are consequences of creating the resource that is time, effort, and production, where no production or effort was created, and you give that out.
Right.
You now create an inflationary pressure on the economy that now needs to be counteracted by higher interest rates, which is pressure upon everybody.
Gotcha.
So that's economics. If you
Economics.
create this,
Actually, I'm not going to agree with that because the problem that we have is that that's something that's just going to have to in order for this to work, it's going to have to, that's a part of the system that's going to have to die, because that is based solely on the concept that you need to beat people into working.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the
well,
problem.
the concept is we needed as a society a way to trade our time and effort to get things we needed. Because before this, we had like what barter as an example.
Right.
So I'm a farmer of cattle, and I create cows and milk, beef, maybe those things. But I want blueberry pies, and so I go to the baker and I say to the baker, "Hey, I would like some blueberry pies. Can I trade you this cow?"
Right.
So the blueberry baker goes, "I don't have a yard. I can't take a cow."
Right.
Now I could take flour, these things. Can you give you those? And so now I need to go around and spend a whole lot of time finding someone to take my cow, so that I can get someone else's thing, to get something else, to finally get the thing that the baker wants, just so I can get a blueberry pie. So that was just not economical. We needed some other systems. So we said, okay, we're going to tether work and effort towards some kind of physical medium. Sometimes that's gold, silver. Sometimes it was, I think the Easter Island people had big stone rings as their currency. It's some other physical medium that we can trade.
It's actually funny you bring up Easter Island, because Easter Island actually is one of the things he talks about too.
Right, I know, that's why I brought it up, because you did talk about it. But there needs to be some physical medium that we can exchange, that is something we all want and need, so that I can get a blueberry pie and not have to give you a cow. I can sell the cows to the people that need cows, and then take that medium to get the things that I want that don't need a cow to be traded for.
Right. Oh, you're getting criticized, by the way, by Brent. I'm just saying.
Where?
For your cable management.
Right.
Brent, you need to come to the house and get him to actually do all of his cable management in one day.
You know what happened was, we moved into the house. I needed to get working really quick, and so I just slapped it all in, got it working.
He's ragging you because he's Brent.
I know. I need a week where I can tear it all down and do it nice, but
that's actually what I had to do over here with this setup. in this rig when I rotated it this way was I had to have a moment where I didn't have a broadcast coming up, so that I could tear everything down, pull all the cables out, sort all the cables, put them all in the correct place, and because over the year things had changed and shifted just a little bit all over the place, and cable management became a mess back here, and now it's all nice and cleaned up, but I had to have everything torn up for a day. The problem really boiled down with that one was I had to broadcast so that I would have somebody with me so that I could stay on task, so that I could then tear up everything so that I could broadcast. Which is sort of the catch-22. Like this broadcast, the whole point behind this broadcast is having it so that I keep on target. Which, by the way, I have successfully done. This is the last comic of 2022 is right now on page 106. So now all we have to do is just make sure that all of them are in here, which I don't think is true. We'll figure it all out, and then I'll go through it again, because I think I'm missing a couple, which need to go in here somewhere, but we'll figure it out. But
so anyways,
to your comment, continue on, please.
So bringing that back that's the basic system we have for pretty much every economy that exists on the planet today.
Sure.
There is some physical form of our work and effort that we can exchange so that we're not back in the barter system. So I don't know how you kill that.
We had this discussion before when we were talking about Bellatrix Rising. We were talking about the system. How does the system work in Bellatrix Rising? And the question really is, why doesn't somebody just give you the blueberry pie? And that's the biggest issue. And there's the crux of the problem. Like, what if we had a system whereby I want to milk cows, and so somebody just says, why don't you just have that little plot of land right over there, put your cows over on it, and you can milk the cows, and then every so often I'll come over and ask you for some milk, and you'll give us milk. You know what I mean? Like, the problem is that people are so afraid that they will be screwed over that they have to put a value on it. That I have to have exactly 12 ounces of milk for my blueberry pie. And in order for it to be an equitable exchange.
The second argument against UBI, tethers to this one. And that's, remember, we've talked about fairness being a big critical issue.
Right, because I mean, like, I have put in hundreds of hours into this comic strip. I paid $5 for it. And that's not actually fair. I mean, like, that's not really equitable. But somebody has valued my comic strip to be about $5.
Well, not really.
Well, I know I could go die and it will go up in value immediately.
But it's not one person really. It's socially all the people over time between artists and the public, if you will, decided that value. The problem is artists don't value their work, and you can't argue against that one. But the public also decided that they wouldn't pay more. They could not bear the value. The economy could not bear the value greater than X. Right. Now, artists could increase their value, which artists do. You know, if you're someone like Banksy, right, your pool of buyers is much smaller.
Right.
But they're there, so he can at least charge some ridiculous values.
Well, and that's the thing that's the discussion that he's kind of got there, which is you end up with a situation where exploitation has occurred because it's not intentional exploitation; it just becomes exploitation. Because what he was saying in the book is that people will do what needs to be done. They will accomplish all the tasks. Donald is saying right now, people don't know how to milk a cow or take care of a cow. Well, but if cows are critical to society, there are people who do know how to milk cows.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who know how to take care of cows. I know because there's milk in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to know how to milk a cow because I can go get it from the grocery store. But even if it was a society where you don't use money, let's just say, I'd still have, Bob the milker, the farmer over here, who would just give me some milk whenever I wanted some milk, and I would give him comics, and he would laugh at my comics, and I would take the milk, and all would work, and the value would still be roughly the same. But if everybody's throwing, comics at Bob the farmer, then I could see what you're arguing is that everybody would just throw comics at it, except that that's not the way that it seems to work in societies that
Mm-hmm.
don't have money. When he talks about like Amazon tribes and things like that, everybody seems to do their jobs. All the jobs get done, and everybody seems to be doing what they want to do too. So he's like, never ends up with this situation that everybody fears, where you have a situation where you have 7,000 artists and one guy doing all the work all the time.
I think there's a bias to that examination, though, because you're comparing a less complex society that has far fewer moving parts, where all the parts may be of equal size and value, to an extremely complex society with high level of specialization, where the parts can be of different size and values. And how do you, in a complex society where the parts can have different values and sizes, how do you equitably distribute said value?
Well, his whole argument, because that's actually a thing that he also says as well, and I'm going to divert from him, as in this is my theory, not his. It is a very complicated society, but we still have teachers, and that's a big thing. Teachers are working for almost nothing, expected to pay out of their own pockets, and still we have teachers. And yeah, teachers are quitting, and yes, there's a workforce shortage. But I still met with 4 people who love and care for my child on Thursday when I went to the teachers' conferences, who are very concerned about the fact that he's not doing the right amount of work, or he's not doing the right amount of things in their classes, and yada, yada, yada. And we all sat around as a team, came up with a plan for that kid. And these people are being paid like 35 grand because they're Jefferson County teachers.
When you refer to teachers, are you referring to all teachers or a particular sector of teaching, which is public education?
Teachers. Which, I mean, the point is that...
So you're referring to also college professors and public or private school teachers?
Anybody who wants to convey or works with, and maybe not college professors per se, I don't want to discount them, but I'm talking about the people who are in the trenches.
I'm not referring to the morality. They're caring for their craft or their profession. You were talking about their low pay. Are you referring to all teachers across all sectors, private school, charter school, public school, and college education, which is professors and things like that? Are they all paid, or is it specifically the public school sector?
I'm heading into a zone and coming back. And so let me go into the zone first and come back. So starting with the presumption that people only work if they're paid. Go into this zone, teachers then make no sense because they aren't getting paid. They're actually struggling and suffering. It's universal. And yet they still care. They still do the job, and they do the job excellently. And yeah, some don't. Some, but again, like looking at the teachers that were dealing with my child, They're very invested. They're very, it's very important to them. My kid is very important to them. And they're very pleased to have me involved. If it was a matter of they won't work unless you're paid enough, then they shouldn't have done that. And what he was talking about was this leads to a certain amount of there's a known factor that you can abuse people because this is actually by default. Humans want to solve problems. Humans want to fix things. Humans want to make things work. So the answer to your question of how do you deal with things that are of a different value is people want to make that work. So how do you make widgets? They want to make widgets. His whole thing was, we've got to include everybody. You and I can make widgets. We can make widgets all day long. But if I order you to make a widget, you're not going to be as interested. But if you and I want to make a widget together as a team, we'll both do it for free. I mean, we're proving that. Did Pepper just drop completely off? I guess he did.
I think so. He just went upstairs for something.
That's fine. But I mean, the point is, like, Pepper and I, we're just sitting here happily and blissfully making comics all day long. We're working hard.
Mm-hmm.
But if I made Pepper make a comic for me, he would never do it. And if he made me make a comic for him, I'd never do it. But if he were to say, hey, let's put out a book that has Springs and the comics of like Poppy, if you were to do that as one unit, and I was to draw my stuff and he was to draw his stuff, and we were just going to put it together and publish it as a book, both of us would work our butts off to do it. And we make good stuff. And he's talking about a number of companies he brought up where they fired all of the management and it's just employees. And it's groups of 10. And so you get a group of 10 employees and they will just do the job. And the jobs are better done. They're more efficient. They cost less, so that they can charge less.
There's an interesting concept and note in that argument about Price is Law, but I'll put a pin in that.
Right, but I mean, that's the whole thing. Is like it's a company in Holland because, of course, he's Dutch, so everything he's coming off of is coming off of what Holland does, which is fascinating when he looks at us, because he looks at us very much as a European looking at an American, as opposed to an American, which usually has a bias to the left or to the right. He has he has a bias. He's definitely biased, but it's not biased in the same way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, his bias isn't set up in the same way as our bias, which is fascinating to me. But anyway, he was talking about a company in Holland that was a medical company, and it's palliative care. So when someone is finally too old to take care of themselves, these nurses come in and take care of them. No problem. That's the company this guy took over. And when he first did was just wipe out all of the upper management and left it just to the nurses. And then he put the nurses in a group, and each group then was in charge of doing the best service that they could and report back to him, the CEO, what changes they made so that he could offer those changes to the other teams. And they could take them or leave them as they wished. So they didn't have to do it. Nobody was required to. And what happened was, over 2 years, across the board, the entire level of care leapt up by an order of magnitude. Everything across the board went better. The care was much, much better. Their reviews went through the roof. And their overhead went down because they didn't have management. So they didn't have to pay management for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so their overhead went down. So they were competitive, much more competitive than the other companies. They were doing better care. They had a better review. Everything was just above board. Far better. far better all the way across. A company in Paris did the same thing with transmission parts. They were they built transmission parts for cars, and somebody came in and did the exact same thing in the 80s. He went in there and it was suffering, and they were just falling apart. They were building bad transmissions. The transmissions were faulty to begin with, and everything like that. And the first thing he did when he went in was, there was a huge window in the CEO's office that overlooked the floor. He put a big board up over it so that he wasn't watching them. And the second thing he did was he started to wait until all the management timed out, and then he wouldn't replace them. And instead, when a manager left, he just turned the division over to the employees and let them be the ones who decided what was best for that division. And what happened was the transmissions suddenly had a far better safety rating, reliability rating. They got much better built. Everything was much better. And now they're the only company left in France building car parts. Everything else is farmed out to Africa. But they're the only company left in car parts that's in France because they're cheaper by far than anybody else. And they build better transmissions.
The problem I would be concerned about those stories is just post hoc ergo propter hoc.
The what?
Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
This, therefore, that. A lot of so there's something called
correlation bias.
Right. There's something called Price's law, which is whenever a structure grows and becomes more complex, a smaller percentage of that organization is doing most of it. So it's like 10% of all the contributors in an organization are doing most of the work. So when you have 10 people, one person is doing most of the work, which that might sound reasonable. It might be the boss, might be the owner, right? When you have 100 people, only 10 people are doing that. And as that grows, I'll have to look it up. It's like even less. That 10% starts shrinking, and even less people start doing most of the work. So inefficiencies start to work their way into the structure of an organization, the larger it is.
When you please email the studies to me, because I'm curious. One of the things that this guy has found more often than not is there are no studies that back those theories up. It's just somebody came up with it in 1964 and everybody just uses it. They quote it. I see that a lot in his studies. He'll have I went and looked into this theory that X, Y, or Z occurs. And what I found was that Bob Smith in 1954 came up with the theory that this was a thing, and everybody quoted it. Yeah, we all see you, Pepper. Bill's head's not that big.
At least not physically.
I love you, Bill. Just saying. But yeah, that's something that I have noticed occurs regularly in his stories. He's like, I know that there's this infamous study that shows that this thing happens all the time with people. And I've heard of it. And so I went and looked it up. And there's no science behind it at all. Nobody did anything. It's just this guy came up with this theory in this book called blah, and everybody believed it. And he notices that happens a lot. So I am all about if you've got the actual study that shows that. But I'm also, one of the things he was talking about was ownership. Because like I said, I can make you work for me and you won't have ownership. But if we work together as a team, you have ownership. And he said people who are forced to work on something don't do a very good job.
Right.
He's like, it wasn't just them firing the managers that caused this to happen. What happened was the bosses of these two companies gave the employees ownership and responsibility of the job, of the task. The task fell on the employees to do it. They were treated as the experts in the field. And that's actually what this guy at the medical thing, he had said. He said, I came in as a businessman. I didn't know anything about medical stuff, and I knew it. What was I going to do? Tell nurses how to run their jobs? That's ridiculous. I'm not a nurse. So the first thing I did was look at everybody who wasn't a nurse and kick them out. What did they know about the job?
Ownership is definitely important, but it's also effective management too. Like in program software development, you have to have that layer of management, and it's not to manage the developers. It's the other way around. You need someone that can convey things that the owners just do not understand, and can translate that for these people, because they don't get development, they don't get software development. So you need to have leaders in your team that can boil things down for them, and that's their job. Like they don't develop, they need to have the job of doing that, so you can get them off your back. Otherwise you'll have owners going in, why isn't this done? It's like, because it's hard, it's complicated, it's not easy.
Right. Thinking about this, though, from the point of view of the Kittiwake, you still need Captain Chang.
Right.
You're not going to be able to just say, we're just going to have a whole bunch of midshipmen run the ship.
Right. It's not going to work.
Nobody's going to say, they want us to go here. Let's go here. He's got to, like, wrangle the cats. And he didn't quit as CEO. He didn't walk away from the company.
Right.
And I don't think he fired all of the management. I'm sure he had a finance guy, somebody who did the numbers. But the point was that there was no, here are 5 nurses, and then here's, Joe Smith, the guy who's in charge of the 5 nurses, who told them to go places and do stuff. Instead, he gave Joe Smith's job to the nurses and said, you guys figure it out. When we get a call, I'll put it out there for all of you guys to figure out who's going to take it, and you guys can do whatever. And it turned out that they came up with this ingenious, like, voting system or something where they voted on jobs. If there was like two groups that were in the same city, they'd vote on the job until they came up with an equitable idea. And a lot of times it was, well, you've got the nurse that's much better with this particular type of situation, so we'll let your team take it. You know what I mean? And it became very efficient, like super efficient all of a sudden, because they were all working towards the same goal. What he was saying was that in the book, it's about goals and being clear about the goals. So you need somebody who's what you're talking about, the person who is great at conveying what the goal is. But that's not somebody in charge. That's just a communicator. Our goal is to build a program that, whatever, let's just say we need to add numbers together in this program. So our goal is that. And he said the big important thing was not to say that you must build Excel. It was the communicator has to say, we want to build a program that will add numbers, because if you do that, then the programmers tend to come up with something better than Excel. Because they they'll build Excel.
They need to communicate the problem. They need to be able to be like, we have a problem. People need to add things together. How can we solve that?
Right.
And then you get
and that's a thought process difference. And what he was saying wasn't that we're doing it totally wrong. He's saying the mentality that we have is that you have to literally go to each programmer and say, put in 6 lines of code. 6 lines. Put it there. Put it in this space. And because we get into that mentality, when we get into that mentality, people just give up and they stop working. Nobody wants to work in that environment, so they stop, which then reinforces the belief that people won't work.
Well, that's my that's my post hoc argument is, did it have anything to do with the pay at all?
No.
With even like, maybe some people still did quit because they weren't paid enough, even though things got better. Maybe people did move on to higher paying positions because they were looking for more money, even though things got greater. Like literally nothing at all to do with the pay. The reason things did get better was because of they reduced the efficiencies that are inherent in Price's law, where they reduced the scale of the organization, they improved working conditions, they got more effective communicators into positions of leadership and things like that. And it literally had no correlation to pay at all.
Right. I mean, and that
possibility. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying there's a possibility that he's making the wrong correlation.
right. What he's correlating really is something that everybody knows, which is if you micromanage people, they give up on the job.
Right.
And what he's saying is that's scalable.
Right.
You can scale that to all large companies. Ownership equals interest in the job. If you've got ownership in it, then you will do your best. If you don't have ownership, then you won't do your best. And
you could almost boil it down to respect. Like, I come in here with a massive set of skills. If you're going to micromanage me, why am I here?
Right.
Like, you're insulting me. You're disrespecting what I bring to the team and the organization by micromanaging me. So I won't stay.
Right. And I am inferring this, by the way. He didn't in the book. He didn't really infer it. He just simply showed that by getting rid of the management layers on this, he got buy-in from all of the nurses. The nurses then did their job. Same thing happened in the French company. Once the engineers got buy-in, they were much more efficient and everything was much better, and the workmanship was much better and much higher. And his whole thing was just it's clear that there is a correlation between micromanagement and losing interest in the job, which that's what he's saying is that's the top of this chain, not bad people, therefore you have to micromanage, which is the chain that we see.
Hi, Brian.
See you later, Brett. So that's the chain you happen to see is, people won't get it done, so I'm going to have to go yell at people.
Right.
That's the chain work that you see when he's saying over and over and over again, it is shown that if you don't micromanage people, they do not only their best, but sometimes even better than you expected. And his theory was very similar to what you were saying. You don't want to present a thing, you want to present a problem.
Right.
People like to solve problems. They don't like to solve, you need them to build 16 widgets by the end of the day. They want to solve a problem. How do we make 17 widgets in a day? Then they'll make 16 widgets while they're trying to make 17 widgets.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they have a goal. And when they get to 17 widgets, they'll be all excited. Then how do you make 18 widgets in a day? Well, we're going to have to build this other machine for it, but let's do that. And then they build another machine, and now they're making 30 widgets a day.
Right.
And the whole point is that while they're doing it, they're happy to come to work. They're excited, they're interested, and they're involved.
Right.
And what he was saying was that happens routinely, yet the workforce is set up with make 16 widgets or you're fired, which then promptly makes them not care, and then they leave. He said it shows up all the time, and that's so the whole point was universal basic income. Going back to that is if you give everybody the ability to get off of the bottom of Maslow's needs so that they're not freaked out, then they do what needs to be done to get themselves back up on their feet. Then they do something for society, because you can't just sit around. Nobody likes to sit around. So if you they said that it costs an extra like $300 or something like that to put just somebody in there to go, hey, let's look around and find you a job. What do you want to do? You know.
And so the problem with that is just then how do we solve inflationary pressure and the human response to fairness?
The human response to, I'm sorry, what?
To fairness. So
yeah, we're very, 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 very sensitive to fair. Yeah. And that's actually what he is sort of, I think, what he's leading to in this next book, because he was talking about it's not necessarily a racism issue that killed UBI the first time. He says it can be pointed to that, but it wasn't. It's really a matter of fairness,
right?
Perceived fairness from, at that time, the white male Dixiecrats, which
it certainly could have been through the lens of.
It expresses itself as a racism issue, but the interesting thing is he doesn't always present racism as a racism. He presents it in sort of it's a fairness problem. And it's because culturally it became unfair. Makes some sense. In other words, they're not racist because they just hate people of a different color. They somehow managed to get it into their fairness part of the petition. That's actually what he's been saying through a lot of this, is that there's a problem with fairness, and you have to come up with, there has to be a suspension where you take people and go, look, this will be fair for all of us if we give it time. You have to get everybody to buy into that. Otherwise, they start freaking out.
I think it would always break down, because I think what would happen is, so let's remove money from it. Let's say we're the barter society, and we want the equivalent of UBI in a barter society, which basically means when you are done with your work, you have to go over to someone else's work or someone else's home who's not doing work and do work for them. Wow. So you are a cow farmer. Your neighbor is a goat farmer. He's not going to go out and tend his flock. So what you have to do is, after you've spent all day caring for your flock, you now have to go over and care for his flock. Now, there are going to be a lot of situations where he's been ill, he's been sick, you're helping him out, he can't tend to his flock, and if you help him out, it's going to help society as a whole, because we'll still have goats. And there's a value to that. But there's going to be some, perhaps small, segment of people who just don't want to do it. They want to have the flock, but they just don't want to put in the work. So you have that cow farmer go over, tend their flock, and he sees it right, and he literally hears it from their mouth. No, I'm never going to do the work. You're going to do the work for me. And then he's going to take that. He's going to take that emotionally. He's going to then have that fester in him, and he's going to share that with people he knows and cares about. And then they're going to share that, because negativity gets shared by, one for every one negative, it's shared 25 times. Where for every good experience, it's like a 1-to-1 almost. So like you'll share it with one other person, and that's about it. So that negativity spreads across the land, and before you know it, UBI in the barter society is.
Yeah, well, except that that's not the way we are designed to do it. What he says is, we have a shame system, and this has worked since the very beginning. And what happens is that we somehow keep suppressing this shame system. So what happens is, the goat farmer, he's sick, so you take care of his herd. Then he's healthy again, but he doesn't want to take care of his herd. So first, what happens is, the sheep farmer down the way comes over and says, hey, what's going on? You okay? And they try to find a solution. If it's just like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. It was really nice to have Bob, the cow farmer, over here doing my work for me. Then the sheep farmer's like, okay, but that's not cool, dude. You know what I mean? We shame them. And it's always worked. Shaming actually works really well. It's one of the reasons we have cancel culture right now, is we don't have a law system that's working effectively enough that we feel like comfortably our law system isn't working comfortably right now. And so people are shaming people into losing their jobs or losing their positions or losing their, they shame them. The shame system is actually how we've always dealt with it. That's how we keep that function from working. So what actually he was saying was, interestingly enough, money prevents the shame system from working, because it doesn't matter as long as you have the money. You don't have to work as long as you've got the money. So if you can come up with some other source of money, you can still have goats out there. And as long as you've got the money, you can make somebody else do the work and you still don't have to work. And that's part of the problem, is that...
Remember, money is time and effort. So when someone else is putting the time and effort to the goats, you have to give them the value of effort that they put into it to do it.
But the problem is that
you, for free.
Goat farmer are not being shamed into doing your work. So you're not pulling your weight in society, which is that's how the whole system works. That's how we've always worked up until farming existed, literally, which is ironic that we're talking about farming, but that's how it's always worked with humans.
Right. But the problem with that is that that's a very culture thing. And that's the thing on both sides of any political argument that they repeat, is that we're having a cultural breakdown. Because culture changes over time. Any good in society or bad in society that's ever happened has come with cultural shifts.
Right, but the shame function has never changed.
Right.
It's been the same for 50,000 years.
If you tether any part of a system to culture, what happens when culture changes? Is the system inherently dysfunctional at that point? I would argue today our system is culturally tethered. And because our culture has changed so much, it's become highly inefficient and dysfunctional.
Right, but this system is, yes, you're right, it's cultural, but you'll notice that it's in every culture. Every culture shames their people.
Yes, but do they always share?
Do it on the internet by cancel culture.
Do they always share fairly? Like we've had problems with cancel culture where they've shamed someone, and then you find out,
it's because
but they're destroyed now and it's over.
We built a system which was actually very useful called a justice system. And that's how we do it, is we shame people by getting 12 people together to decide whether you should be shamed or not.
Right.
And then that way it's distributed. So that it's not just me that decides to shame Bill. It's people who all agreed, we talked it over, and we shamed you. And that's the way it's supposed to work, and has worked forever and ever and ever. Is there's always been an impartial moderator who then decides whether you should be shamed or not. And if it's not, then it ends up being what we've got now, which is the problem with cancel culture, is that it's a vigilanteism, which is not appropriate. You can't have vigilanteism. Batman doesn't really work, because then you end up with the judge, jury, and executioner as one person who could be mad. So humans have known that all along. That's what the justice system is all about, is distributing the shame. You didn't do your job, okay? So 12 of us are going to get together, and we're going to discuss whether you were, and somebody's going to say, but you were sick. And all of us will go, oh, okay, never mind. He doesn't need to be shamed. He was sick. That makes sense. So you didn't do your job, and that's cool. We'll come over and help you. That's happened all along throughout the history of culture. And we just call it different things. The justice system is what we call the shame system right now.
Right.
And what we do is we used to excommunicate people. Like, what we would do is we'd kick them out. So instead of shaming you, we wouldn't shame you, Bill. We'd kick you out. We'd say, out you go, boot. And we'd boot you. And you'd go become somebody else's problem. If you don't want to be part of our problem, you can, and the fact that you want to be part of our family is what propels you to do your job. If you don't want to be excommunicated, that was the threat, if you will. But the truth is, usually people would realize that you were having a buy-in. Like, I still make comics every week. why do I make comics? Nobody's paying me. So
Right.
why do I do it? If I stopped making comics, and I did stop making comics for a while, and actually Cayen brought this up last night. I stopped making comics for a while. Everybody was worried. Nobody in our group said, gosh, he's lazy. Nobody went to that logic process. They all went, what's wrong, Guy? What's happening here? And that's what the problem is that he was saying, by default, we default all the time to, clearly he's lazy. Clearly he doesn't want to. Instead of defaulting to, why is the goat farmer not doing his job? Instead of going to, because he's a lazy idiot and would rather watch Oprah. If everybody came in and said, what's going on, man? And he goes, oh, I'm getting divorced. My kid hates me. Okay, let's fix these problems. Let's see what we can do to keep you back on your feet. And instead of doing that, what we end up doing is, well, you didn't do your job, you didn't produce, so therefore we're going to excommunicate you. That becomes a different problem because it causes heartache in the person, makes them hard. They distrust, and then the next time they do the next job, they suck at it because they're forced into some job they don't want to do. They're doing something they don't want to do, and they're lousy at it because they've just learned that they're wrongfully. Because everybody, you're talking about fairness. If you and Pepper were having problems, marital problems, and your production went down, and my response was, I'm sorry, I don't care what's going on in your life. You're not doing your job. You're fired. Then the next time, you're just not going to care. Nobody cares because we don't care about you. So why would you care about us?
Right.
And so because of a culture that's like that.
That's a fundamental problem with fairness as an integrated part of humanity. Is fairness is highly subjective from the position of the viewer, right? So what I think is fair is not what you think is fair.
Right.
You may come close, but we're going to have very different views about what's fair.
But you and I are not going to disagree on certain things. And I mean, like, if you and Pepper are having marital issues, things, you're yelling at each other all the time, and you're coming into work and you're tired, and you look like you've been crying a lot. I'm not going to have a different view than other people about whether or not you are in trouble. You know what I mean? Like, I'd have to be freaking inhuman in order to decide that I'm sorry, my interpretation of fairness says that you're clearly okay, get to work, which is actually like the core of all horror stories from, you know what, I'm going to turn this on to my camera instead of, we're not doing work over here. Might as well look at you. But I mean, like, that's the core of all those work horror stories. My boss, you know, like, it's funny, clickbait that I see. That's one of the clickbaits is, you know, a text message that says, I'm not coming in. You have to come in because I've scheduled you. I'm at my daughter's funeral. I don't care. Come in anyway. You know what I mean? Like,
I think a lot of those either aren't real or very rare, but we, like you said, we blow them up and we share them by 1 to 25, and it just, like fire, goes across everything.
And even when you look at the core of what caused that manager to do that, I'm sure you'd find that somebody was threatening their job and their livelihood if they don't get that person in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so
it could go either way. Someone could be pressuring them, or they could have had so many issues with that particular employee up to that point that were just it, you know?
Yeah. So there's like mitigating circumstances, but the point is that, you know, you talk about fairness, and we can postpone fairness in various ways. For example, it's not fair if you want to go get pizza and I want to get hamburgers and we go get hamburgers. But if we ask you, me, and Pepper to vote, and you two vote for pizza, well, or let's do it the other way. Pepper and I vote for hamburgers and you vote for pizza. You're willing to accept that because the majority ruled.
Well, to a certain extent, right?
Right, but I mean, but you are willing to accept it because fairness is suspended for the fact that a vote has occurred, and it's fair. What's not fair is if I say, if both of you want pizza and I want hamburgers, and we go get hamburgers, that's not pretty much, that's not subjective. That's very objective. Right? So fairness can be suspended for certain reasons. And if all of us get together and look at you and say, you know, and oh, let's do 13. Uneven number. 7 people decide that it's not okay for you to have done X, Y, or Z, and 6 of us decide that it was okay for you to do X, Y, or Z. You can still say that that's fair. You know, you probably wouldn't personally feel that it was very fair, but you could at least suspend, at least the culture would suspend fairness. Part of the reason we don't find cancel culture to be fair is because one person's making a call. And that's not fair, and we can sense it.
Right.
We all sense that that's not fair, and that's the reason why cancel culture is having backlash in society.
Well, and another with tethering things to culture is, say, there's a group of 10 of us, and you're a vegan. You're the only vegan in there. But every time we keep voting, we always keep voting to eat somewhere that is pretty much meat. We never have anything to eat. Like, is that still fair? Because instead of us keep voting as a group,
you're a vegetarian and we all vote for meat and you're stuck every time.
Right.
But that's where you have the moderator. That's what you need a moderator for. You know, because then, but I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but especially amongst your friends, people who are willing, that's where you have to have a common goal, right? Our common goal, the problem here is one of us doesn't eat meat. Okay, well, you know, this is Meat Our Us, is this restaurant, and all of us want to go to Meat Our Us, and you don't eat meat, and that's an issue. But if you put it in we're going to put it to a vote because we've had you fight us all the time, every time for everything anyway. So we're going to put it to a vote because we're tired of you screwing up our plans all the time because it wasn't just this. That's a different story. You know what I mean? Like, that's not fair. But if it's just equal, like today I just met you and we meet and there's no loaded baggage, then I'll sit there and go, well, let's not go to Meat Our Us. Let's go to, Half and Half Our Us. Because that's got meat in it, but it also has a vegetarian. And most of the time we will all agree, oh yeah, it's a great thing, and all of us vote, and it'll become unanimous. But if it does become a pizza versus burgers where it doesn't really matter whether, like, it's not going to kill you. Like, let's say you're a vegetarian because you had your stomach removed or something. It will hurt you to have meat. Then there's no way we're going to vote for Meat RS and have to put up with it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a vegetarian, and that's one of the reasons why it's dangerous to classify people in a way which puts them outside, where it makes choice sound less valuable. If you choose to be homosexual, we can all decide that you just need to stop doing that. That's not cool. That then screws up. It becomes okay for us to decide that because it's not going to hurt you. But
I,
if we find
I
out,
brought up that point with Pepper once. I was talking about something, and I think we were talking about religion, and I said I don't think the problem is religion as much as people dislike sometimes specifically certain religions. Um, it's anything that gives people an excuse to do something immoral without having to feel immoral. So, like, if we take it back to the being gay, if there's something out there that says, oh, being gay is wrong, even if it's not even like big wrong, it's like, even if it's low on the chart of wrongness you could do in the world, if it gives someone the excuse to dislike them for being gay because this thing allows me to do that and I can feel like I've done nothing wrong because my religion supports me or my government supports me. It could be anything. It doesn't need to be religion. Once you give someone the excuse to be immoral, then they can be, and they don't feel like they
I don't know if I'd go there.
are.
I mean, not like I.
That's what you were describing, because when you say if you view it as a choice, so there's the excuse. Now it's a choice. Now we can exclude them without feeling bad, without having that nature of morality exert itself that we must include them. Now we don't need to do that. We've given ourselves the excuse.
Right, because I actually this started with a friend of mine who is gay, and I had talked to him and said, wouldn't it be wonderful if you guys found out that there was a biological reason? And he's like, no, because it still shouldn't be wrong for me to choose. It shouldn't be wrong. It's none of your business what I choose. He's like, that's like finding out that you're biologically a Trekkie and therefore it's okay for you to like Star Trek. No, it's okay for you to like Star Trek. It doesn't matter. And I've been thinking about that a lot. There's a specific scene in Picard season 3, episode 1 that you'll know I'm talking about. I'm trying not to say it because it's not a spoiler per se. But, it is definitely something that has made me think. And it's about names and what your name is that you choose versus what your name is that you were given versus, and you talk about trans people or whatever in that essence. They choose to be identified a certain way. And that's their choice. And it really shouldn't be anybody else's thing. Like when I went to Japan, they insisted on using my first name. They let me have sensei, which was the honorific for a teacher, but it was Guy Sensei. It wasn't Davis Sensei, right? And their excuse was, well, in Japanese, the names are flipped, and we don't want to confuse them. But the kids didn't care. And really what it boiled down to is in their culture, just like in ours, if you call your teacher Bob, that's less respectful than Mr. Smith. And it was the same thing. They were managing to end run a way to demonetize us and to put us down one step by making us be called Mr. Bob instead of Mr. Smith, which infantized us just a little bit. And they wouldn't back down from that easily. And it's interesting because the same situation actually happens in the first issue or first episode of Picard. You'll see what I'm talking about, where it doesn't matter whether it's justified or logical. The name that was chosen is important. And that's actually why I'm horrified that I have aphasia in names. Because you go by Bill, and if you wanted to, I can't call you, William. You don't choose to be called William. But if I called you William all the time, it would, we're still going. If I called you William all the time, you'd get mad at me after a while. Because you're like, really? Or like, if I called Pepper by his real name, It's the same thing. His name is Pepper. He
Mhm.
chose Pepper. That's his choice.
Mhm.
Just like I chose Guy. It just happens to be that Guy happens to be the name that's on my birth certificate. But that doesn't mean that, it's like I chose it. I selected it. I could have. My dad actually gave me a middle name that's usable as a very straightforward, very bland, very normal name in case Guy got too much. Because he anticipated that people would be making Guy jokes, You're a
Mhm.
great guy,
Mhm.
and that I might get upset with it at some point. So he gave me a middle name that was Steve.
Mhm.
Steve. But as I've grown up, I'm like, nah, I kind of like the jokes. They're kind of funny. I mean, they get old after a while, but I don't mind them and they don't bother me. And I usually go, ha, so it's not an issue.
Mhm.
But if I had chosen to be Steve and everybody kept calling me Guy, hi, Steve,
Mhm.
I'd be like, you know what I mean? And so it's the same thing. You should have the right to choose to be gay. Even if you aren't biologically gay or whatever, that should be your choice. Yeah, exactly. All those jokes. No, I get it. And actually, you're not bothering me at all, Brian. That should still be okay because nothing that you do in your relationship affects society.
Mhm.
There's nothing that happens in your bedroom that's going to affect our society. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And study after study after study has also shown that you and Pepper will be just as good of parents as
Mhm.
Mariah and me.
Yep.
And there's nothing. So the only thing that you could even edge case say is, well, maybe two men can't raise a child. Except
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And two women can raise a child just fine too. In fact, 4 men can raise a child. 3 women can raise a child. 2 men and 1 woman can raise a
I
child.
would say maybe edge case they could argue, well, they don't have a feminine perspective, and I'm like, there's no gay men that will be.
And that actually, I have come to the conclusion that's actually what they're talking about when they're talking about binary.
Yeah.
So many people are, I've got a certain amount of me that's feminine,
Mhm.
and I know that. I've got a very feminine perspective on a lot of things. And what
Mhm.
they're really saying is, everybody's not John Wayne. If you're
Mhm.
male, if you have a penis, you're not John Wayne.
Right.
Like, it's some of us are more like Prince, and
Yeah.
some of us, more. It's just the way it is, and
Mhm.
that's bad or good. It's
Right.
just who we are, and that's what non-binary really means. Is just some of us are more female than male, even though we have penis, or whatever. And some of us are more male than female, even though we have a vagina. Age.
Mhm.
Your genitals don't have any effect on what role you play in society. And I think that's the biggest problem is
Right.
there are nurturing people who believe that they need to mother and nurture. And then there are people who believe that they need to guide and discipline.
Mhm.
And those are 2 different roles in our society that we've traditionally applied to the mom and to the dad.
Mhm.
People just have a hard time accepting that have men who are nurturing and women who are disciplinarian. And, it doesn't matter just because that's the case. And
I think I've already described to you, like, I really don't want to carry forward in the education of my children the bucketing system we have for sexuality.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to keep teaching gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight. I'm like, I'm gonna teach. You could be attracted to a whole lot of things. If you want to put yourself in one of those buckets, Godspeed. But
have a ball,
yeah.
find a bucket, and get into it. My cat gets into boxes all the time.
But like that's not real. That's society identifying patterns and putting labels on them. That's what that is. But that's not reality. There's a spectrum, and everyone's on it somewhere. And that's That's it. That's how biology works.
I had this interesting discussion with my buddy
Mm-hmm.
who recently realized he's bi.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always said, I think it's a percentage. And I've been like, yeah, I think you're actually right. Because, okay, I've always considered myself very straight, very heterosexual, yada, yada, yada. But I also know that I grew up in the 80s with homophobia. And so there's a bias.
Mm-hmm.
There's implicit bias against males in my brain that's there. And I get that, and I understand that, and I accept it. But as we've been talking about it, I think I'm really probably 90-10. I'm
Mhm.
sure that somewhere out there is probably some guy that I would probably go, he's kind of cute.
Mhm.
If I wasn't homophobic, if I wasn't locked down, wouldn't. And I always make the joke about Prince because I feel like Prince was attracted to men and women.
Mhm.
Like, just the nature of who Prince was. So I always make the joke that Prince is in that 10%. You know, like, because that would be the thing. And by just making that exception, making that understanding in my heart and understanding that, it's been a whole lot easier to just relax on a lot of things. I mean,
The way
so-
I would describe it for other men is if you've ever been intimidated or threatened by another man because he may look better than you for your significant other, there is no way you would have even known that unless on some level you found them attractive. Because how else would you have known?
right,
You can't perceive the threat unless you can identify it.
right. And but that's a thing that's interesting. And I've got to give props to you and Pepper and my other buddies who are also a married couple, that you guys have really wiped out my homophobia, like to a very core level.
Mhm.
Time, that's a lot of hard programming we got in the 70s and 80s. We got a lot of really ugly, hard programming, which is now, I feel much more relaxed about it.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to say I wanted to give you props for that. Even though I think you found me at the very end of this journey, but still, you're part of the journey. But it is still an interesting thing. This is all structured in society. And that brings us back to what we were talking about before, which is when do we shun you?
Mhm.
Right?
And oftentimes they're going to be on cultural lines.
Right.
And that's the thing as a tribe, as a society. Where are those lines?
Money doesn't equalize that. Economies don't equalize that.
No.
There's still, so to your original thing where you're talking about, but shunning is part of a societal structure. All of this is a societal structure.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter. The economy is not operating on a societal structure at all, or it's not. It's divorced from it, and it doesn't. As in like
Mhm.
having a societal structure still, that's not solved by an economy.
Mhm. So
You're still beholding to it, to the structure.
right, part of capitalism was designed based off of the morality of humans in that we are greedy. So, so I'm just talking about the basic concept of capitalism is all of humanity is greedy. So what we're going to do is we're going to leverage greed for the best outcome of all.
Right.
So in order for me to be greedy, I need to produce something. I need to contribute to society to fulfill my greed. And to expand my greed, I need to take my productivity to the next level and form an organization of greedy people who want to produce more and make more. So that was the whole concept that kind of stemmed out. And we wanted to take a negative and turn it into a positive.
And
it's that culture based, right?
He actually says in his books, he says capitalism actually has gotten us to here. He's like, we've gone from, he said, if you look at anybody in 1550 and the cost of living and the standards of living in the 1550s versus now, That's capitalism that got us here.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that 85% of the people on this planet now live in a relatively comfortable society, and 99% live in a comfortable society relative to those in the 1500s.
Right.
That's capitalism. He
Mm-hmm.
says it's not that we can't lay all of this at capitalism's feet. We can't. Capitalism works. The problem is now we've hit a point where we've brought most of the people up, but now you have the inequality that's coming in that's inherent in capitalism, and something else needs to be added on top.
Yeah.
He's like, it's not that capitalism needs to go away. It's not that capitalism is bad. It's just that now it's clear there's an inequality now because you've got 1% that holds 99% of the wealth. And that's an inequality that needs to be balanced out somehow.
We have to acknowledge at some point that we don't have true capitalism anymore.
Right.
We're an extremely hybrid economy that is not capitalism.
Right. It's oligarchic. And I think that probably he will come to the conclusion in this book that it's really because they've leveraged capitalism to become a medieval function again, which is what's really happening as the capitalism is diminishing down. He says, but the free market doesn't work. Even left alone, the free market doesn't work perfectly. It still needs some kind of moral substrata that works underneath.
What typically happens, and I'll leave it on this note just because we're almost 12 o'clock and I don't want to keep you forever.
Yeah, it's all good. I love, by the way, this discussion. I'm hoping I'm not scaring you away.
No.
Okay. Good, because I love talking to you about this stuff. You help me refine my thoughts, and your thoughts are fascinating and very intelligent. And so, like, I have to, like, always think through what you say. So I want you to know I appreciate it. Just so you know that. I feel like sometimes we have these discussions and I just talk over you, and I don't want because I've got Pepper's same. I've got to tell you all this stuff. Like, same thing.
Right.
You're very introspective and quiet, and so I feel like sometimes I'm like, I don't need to run you over, man.
It all stems from ADD, and I want to get it all out.
Yes.
But you learn as a child you can't do that. Right. And so, like, I'm in my head, I'm like fighting, like, no, he's still talking. He's still talking, but I want to run. I want to make a point. I want to respond to it.
I know, and I keep just talking, and then somewhere along the line, I'm like, oh God, I think I've just overrun him. You know, because I'm on the other side.
You have to have discourse, and you got to give people, or else even when you watch this, like, two people in discourse, like, they let the other person go for a little bit. Sometimes when they run too long, the other person's like, wait, you just covered like 5 things.
Right.
you're leaving stuff I gotta go over. But yeah, I try to butt in when I feel like you're gonna run past 7 different things, and I'm gonna respond with the first. But the point I was gonna leave it at was I think inherent in any society's development within their economy is it doesn't need to be capitalism. It could be anything, any economic structure. Is because none of them solve all the problems.
Sure.
So you take capitalism, it's put in place, but there are these different problems. There are these different views of fairness. Even if they are actually within the structure, they're perfectly fair. They're not great. We don't want to leave everyone behind, but that's just the reality is some people sometimes can be left behind, regardless of the system you choose in place. Sometimes there are, like in what you're describing, like you're going to shun them. So you're basically threatened to leave them behind. Either you do a thing, or you're shunned and you're out. So there's some percentage is always going to be left behind, for better or worse. So regardless of that situation, you start to have groups form wherever unfairness is perceived, and then they are going to argue this is unfair. There needs to be a system in place to protect us. sometimes there's perfectly good reasons. Coca-Cola builds a production facility out in Ohio, and they're spilling chemicals into the river, and capitalism allows that. So we need to do something about that. Whether or not capitalism actually has a method for addressing it, which it can, but it's unfair, and we're not going to address it via the capitalism way. We're going to address it legislatively. And so we don't, and then typically, as we've discussed, where we were talking about in politics, we often don't go for the more complex solution that is, we had to put more effort into thinking about it, where maybe we work with Coca-Cola to take their pollutant and turn it into some stream of economic income for the city that both doesn't go into the river and helps the city grow.
Right.
Instead, we're going to do the easy thing and say, no, Coca-Cola, you can't do this, which on its face is fine. But now pile on a couple 100 years of stuff and legislation, and before you know it, you're no longer capitalistic economy, you're some hybrid.
Right.
And now all of these things have, typically, every action has an unintended consequence. And now you have unintended consequences everywhere, which are also unfair. And we try to solve those with very simple things, which all have their unintended consequences. And before you know it, everyone's going, capitalism sucks. And it's like, we left capitalism a long time ago.
Well, and I think that even if in that instance, I was just thinking about this, it might be actually beneficial to let that extend. You have Coca-Cola's dumping chemicals into the river. Get 12 people to get 13 people together and vote on whether that's shunnable or not.
Right. That is what we did. That was legislation. Like we shunned them, but instead of like just giving them negative PR, we literally said, we are going to shun you so hard, we're going to arrest and shut you down if you keep doing it.
And that's actually something that he does talk about, is punitive shouldn't happen. Really, what should have happened is just like we were talking about with the goat farmer. First thing that should happen is the sheep farmer should come over and say, are you okay? You know what I mean? And that's what you were talking about before, which was, let the company figure out how to solve the problem.
Right.
So you come in and say, look, it's not acceptable for you to pour chemicals in the river, and so you got to fix it, and then let Coca-Cola figure it out. And then if they don't, then you put together the 12 people that shun them. And what he's saying is that we too quickly in society, whether it be for Bill or for Coca-Cola, we too quickly go from, hey, Bill, here's the problem. Oh, you didn't fix it. We're punishing you. And instead, we should be doing the, hey, Bill, here's the problem. Can I help?
Right. Doing the harder thing is we just don't often want to do the harder thing.
Right. That's what he's saying, is it is harder as a manager. It's harder to, I'm your manager. You have to produce 16 widgets by the end of the day. You produced 10 widgets. It's easier for me to come up to you and just say, if you don't produce 16 widgets by the end of the day, I'm going to punish you. Then it is for me to go, are you okay? Do you need help? Can we fix this line? Is there something wrong? Because then if I come in and say, can I help? You're likely to say, well, there's a missing gear on the widget maker and we have to fix a whole bunch of widgets every time, which is costing time, because then I'm not going to be able to finish my production queue because now I have to go fix your production queue. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. He said part of it is that with this stacked issue, with all of these people stacked up and everybody has to produce, nobody can fix things. Because if it's just me and I've got nothing better to do with my day except make sure you get your widgets done, then it's easy. So I come into you and I say, hey, Bill, why haven't you gotten your 16 widgets done? You say there's a broken wheel and I've got nothing else to do in my day except make sure you get your 16 widgets done. I will come over and fix your widget or fix the wheel so we can get the widget. You know, and it's a different mentality. But once you get all of these chains of people where I only have about 10 minutes to figure out what's wrong with you not making your 16 widgets, and you say it's a broken wheel, I'm going to say I don't care. Fix it. You know what I mean? And it's not because I'm being mean. I'm just upset. See you later, Travis. We're having a great discussion here that's actually relevant to my comic. I know it sounds like it's not, but it is. And so...
But it's 12 o'clock, and I probably should go get lunch.
We've all got to go to lunch. I haven't had breakfast or lunch or anything. So, anyway, my dear friend, I am so glad to talk to you. I'm glad you listened to me. Thank you for listening.
I'm glad to talk to you too.
And I love talking to you about these things. So join me again whenever you can.
You got it.
Someone's at the front door. Wow. Totally on time. Okay, I will talk to you later, my friend. And as to everybody else who's been hanging out with us, thank you for being here, and we'll see you. I'll be on again tonight to do more work. And as always, keep your eyes on the stars. Bye, Bill. Thank you.
Bye.